Hey guys, this is really now video number 3 in my ATC 70 series. Did the first one taking it down to here. I did a second video showing how to get the actual engine to run on the bench and how to set your points or how to correct points problems. And now I've just got to get the rest of this apart. The front axle is stuck, which is not a good sign. Looks like the wheel seals aren't new, but the axle and the spacers are all moving together, making me think it's all rusted together. That doesn't give me a good feeling about getting the back of this apart. And the exhaust doesn't look like it comes out unless you actually remove the rear axle and the carrier. So we are going to try to just strip this thing down, and let's see how far we can get in this video. So here's a quick little demonstration of how stuck this is. I've got a screwdriver on the other side, and when I turn it, you can see everything is turning together, including that spacer. And when I say this thing is tight in there, it is tight in there. So we're going to try a little bit of heat and see if that makes any difference, but I'm getting the impression this is going to be a struggle. Well, a little bit of heat didn't do a thing on the front, and I whacked that. This nut is going to be sacrificed. So I may need to actually take this outside where I can really heat it up and whack it. So instead, let's try taking off the rear tires. Got my little lift under there. I got the thing up in the air. Let's see if they come off. And much like my ATC 90 video, here's another example of why you never ride these things until you check them over. Look how loose these bolts are. All right, this one's broken off. These 3 are totally loose. 2 of them are tight. Crazy. All right, and on the bench you can see the tire is all dry rotted. The valve stem was mounted on the inside. This is even rustier, and the challenge here is going to be getting these 2-piece wheels apart. I can tell you that's never easy. And the second wheel came off. Much like the first one, that side actually has the 3 studs. It'll be the same problem. I dropped a washer on the floor, and I'm not going to spend an hour crawling around looking for it, because like a lot of these bikes, it's got a bunch of mixed up hardware that I'm going to replace with the right stuff. And so now we've got the fenders off. They came off without any drama. I shot some penetrating oil on all the bolts because, well, the bolts are going to come out. I'm guessing that axle might be a little bit of a struggle. I'm going to have to take this thing outside and grind off this weld. And I say outside because I had just too much stuff in here to be doing anything that creates a lot of sparks. On the positive side, there is almost no play in the axles, unlike my 90, which is great. So a little bit more tear down and we'll be done here. All right, so I'm a little surprised how much effort it took to get the front wheel off, only because the seals on both sides of this wheel look relatively new. Here you can see these tires are shot. I resorted to a sledgehammer after using some heat. Of course, I put the axle nut on the end of it and sacrificed it. You can see it's squished. And if we go over to the bench, the reason it was so hard to get out is these spacers were stuck on this shaft, although when you look at it, it's not really that rusty. So really, this is the one from the right-hand side of the bike. This looks like it was kind of rusted in a little bit. But long story short, with a pair of vice grips, I could not break that from the shaft. Heat didn't do me any good, and I heated it up quite a bit just with a propane torch. Finally, after enough lube and enough wax with the sledgehammer, it finally came apart. So on a bike that's been together for 50 years and been outside, as you can tell from this rust, don't expect these hubs to just come off. You're going to need a wheel puller. I do this by hand, although you can put an impact on there. Tighten it up a bit. Make sure you've got some lube. I'm using PB Blaster. Whack it with a hammer from behind. Eventually, it'll come apart. You can see how rough these things are. I'm going to soak those in Evaporust and clean them up.
All right, guys, so here we are with the bike upside down on the bench now. The exhaust is still in there because the 74 model holds the distinction of having to have the axle out of the way in order to get the exhaust out. And I learned that by reading the shop manual last night. I can't get the axle out of the way because my brake hub is frozen solid, and I need to pull that apart. And I'm thinking that I'm going to use my bearing puller set to do that. So let's give that a shot. All right, so as luck would have it, sometimes you don't have the right tools. In this case, my biggest bearing puller will not fit over there. So now I'm back to trying to go to a gear puller, but my biggest gear puller isn't deep enough to actually get that off of there. So what I'm going to do is I've got a couple of arms here from other gear pullers that have given up the ghost over the years. I'm going to see if I can extend this and maybe use this to pull it off. So sometimes you got to get creative, and this is pretty creative. I not only used that extra set of arms I had, but I took apart another smaller puller to give me a little bit of distance here, and I'm going to pull on this thing gently and see what happens. So let's give that a shot. So you can see I time-lapsed this, but I really didn't have to because with a little bit of pressure, it popped right off of there. Hey guys, sorry for all the layers, but my shop hasn't warmed up yet today. So number one, don't be afraid to get creative every once in a while when you need to. And don't be afraid to bring in the big guns. That was easy. So now the last thing I've got to do is get that axle out of there. And in the manual it says, from the non-brake side, tap it with a hammer, hold the center hub, and drive it through. That thing is stuck. So I got some thinking to do. But in fooling around and moving the bike around, hey, the exhaust finally came out. That's a big win. And aside from the fact that it's a big rusty mess, it's solid. It doesn't have any holes in it, and doesn't really have any rot. And as you can see, as I'm standing here talking about it, stuff is falling out from the inside. But hopefully, this will be somewhat usable. We'll see. Hey, one of the cool things about my old Harbor Freight motorcycle lift table that you don't see on a lot of tables is it's got this really cool slide-out back panel that allows you to take off your back wheel or the front wheel, depending on which way you have the bike on there, and work on it. So I just slid it back a little bit. That allows me to have the bike still on the table, but with the axle going through. I put a couple of blocks of wood in there to support it, and I'm going to see what I can do about driving that thing out. So wish me luck. So that was remarkably easy. I time-lapsed it, but it literally took 2 seconds. I think I hit this thing 2 or 3 times, and boom, out it came. And it's actually not in bad condition. So that's a win. Here's that inner hub. And I gotta guess, this is the original sprocket on this bike. And when you look at the teeth, after 50 years, and I'm sure it's never been changed, they're still not bad. I mean, this thing is almost usable the way that it is. So, and it's got a rubber seal here, which is still in decent condition. So what the heck? So let's get the rest of that frame apart. There's not much there, and then we can figure out, we're gonna paint it, we're gonna powder coat it, we're gonna leave it alone. And at this point, the leave it alone option is just not on the table anymore. All right, so most of the rest of this came apart pretty easily. I got the front forks off, as you can see, and only lost 1 ball bearing to the depths of my shop. That's okay, I have others around here. Everything else is good. Took the bar off of the back, which looks like it's in good shape, but the underside is a bit beat up. Probably cheaper to replace that than to replate it. And the last thing I've got to do is get the chain tensioner off. I've got this wonderful bit of welding here, and I'm just going to take a grinder and see if I can grind that off. And I'm going to do that outside because I've got too much stuff in here right now to be creating a lot of spark. So let's take a shot at that. All right, now I didn't film that part as I had to drag everything outside, but you can take a look. Just basically ground all that weld off of there, and you know, gonna need to get a new tensioner assembly because the guy welded all the way through here. The teeth on the inside are kind of shot, and when you look at the shaft, I mean, the reason he welded it together was because there's really no teeth left here either. So on the positive side, it came out easy. On the negative side, I'm going to have to replace these parts. All right, guys, so we've come to the end of another episode. I've got everything cleaned up now, the frame and the forks on the bench behind me. I've decided I'm going to get that powder coated along with the rims. I could do the rims and the forks myself, but my oven's not big enough to do the frame, so easier just to bring it to somebody. So that's one line of work we have to get done. We're going to rebuild that engine, clean it up, and then we've got all the little bits and pieces that have to be done. So this thing is going to be pretty nice when we're all set. Stay tuned for those episodes. Do me a favor, subscribe if you like my content. Give me a like or leave some comments below, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. And remember, good things happen on a Honda.